This is the third and final video I'm making on the Pikmin series. Previously, we talked about Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2 in that order, so you should check out those other videos first. I'll put the playlist link in the corner for you. Watch the whole thing in order, because I'll be referring back to previous points from both videos in this one. Basically, this review will be full of spoilers for the entire main Pikmin series. Just keep all that in mind before you decide to watch the rest of this video. Now let's wrap this thing up. Despite a quick development cycle giving us 2 Pikmin games within 2 years of each other, the third entry was just something that kept getting talked about. Like, Miyamoto kept saying it would be out super soon and even said it would come out for the Wii, but it didn't. And I think it's pretty accepted that the Pikmin series sells well, but not enough to be a super mega ultra smash hit, so it slipped off Nintendo's priority list, which is one of the many reasons they're a dumb company. Pikmin 3 was comparable to Breath of the Wild in that from about 2011 to 2013, it was the Big N's biggest project, but it took forever for it to be revealed and even longer for it to be released. The game would later be officially shown off as a Wii U title with a big graphical boost due to the new console's high-def specs. Since I don't own a Wii U, and probably never will, I had to hope that someday this game would get ported to the Switch. That hope was the main reason I held off on reviewing Pikmin 2 or even thinking about a series retrospective at all. But late last year, Pikmin 3 Deluxe was released on Switch, and I was so freaking excited. Heck, I don't even have a box to show off this time. I was so impatient I bought this game digitally. I finished the main campaign in like a day. Whoops. So I did a second playthrough on Ultra Spicy mode, and I got platinums in all the extra modes. Then I replayed the story mode 3 more times, and then I replayed the missions over and over. So long story short, this is my second most played game on my Switch after Breath of the Wild. So I guess you could say I kind of really like it. Let me dive into why in this Pikmin 3 Deluxe long form review. This game takes longer to get going than either of the other 2 games. In terms of structure, I wouldn't say the game really gets into that typical Pikmin flow, kind of, until you reach the distant tundra, which would typically be reached on day 3 or 4. However, I want to focus on how day 1 takes even more time than normal to complete due to this game's cinematic approach to introducing our characters. We even have a fully narrated opening this time. That's pretty cool.
At last, the explorer's 279,000 light-year voyage nears its end. But as they initiate the landing sequence,
as seen in the cutscene, our 3 characters fall to the Pikmin planet, now named PNF 404, which is a fun little internet reference, and get split up. First, we meet up with Captain Charlie in a snowy field. He soon meets a group of yellow Pikmin, a nice change of pace from first meeting some reds, and in a bout of fear he tries whistling at them and then tossing them to get them off his back before realizing they're friendly. After some more walking, Charlie gets attacked by some mysterious force off camera. Ooh, spooky. Then we switch perspectives to Alf, the ship's engineer, who has landed in a more tropical biome. Here he meets the red Pikmin, and through a bit of work, he learns how to target nearby objects, how to get Pikmin to work on something like building a bridge using these tiles. He learns how to grow more Pikmin using pellets and enemy corpses, which also teaches the player about some basic combat. And he learns how to get the Pikmin to charge. After this, Alf stumbles upon his ship, the SS Drake, with the help of the Copad, which serves as a map and has some other features that you can use if you want, but I never really do. I will say though, it also looks like a really cool idea for a video game controller. Like, I really hope somebody makes a thing like that someday. Sunday. Sunset, nightly predators, the onion takes off, etc, etc, Pikmin. Now who wants to guess what my main critique with this opening section is? Well, if you said, and I quote, "It's too flip-flopping long," then ding ding ding, you nailed it. I understand why that's the case though. The story is more ambitious, the controls work completely differently now, the Pikmin have new things they can do, and also, in case you forgot, this was the first Pikmin game in almost a decade. That means entirely new players, people who enjoyed the game as a kid who hadn't played in forever, and even new things for recent players to learn about. However, I've already been through this story like 4 times, so I think this all takes forever. And that's probably my fault for oversaturating myself, but still, there's gotta be a way that I can start a new file and get through the first day in a few minutes and get to the Pikmining I'm actually here for. Despite Olimar butting in pretty frequently in the first game's first day, the intro is pretty brisk. You could get through it in less than a normal Pikmin day's length if you sped up his text. The following 2 games have placed a lot of emphasis on narrative, which makes the tutorial days longer than they need to be. I think that to an extent makes Pikmin gameplay feel more confusing and daunting than it actually is. But you know what's even worse about how 3 handles it? I don't even consider the tutorial done at this point, because the second day has you exploring your first full area, experiencing real combat for the first time, collecting your first few fruits, learning about a new type of Pikmin, and learning about what you can do with multiple captains. Thankfully, the characters actually talk for themselves this time, and double thankfully, most of the dialogue and cutscenes are skippable. However, all of the fake playing that teaches you how to do stuff is not skippable, which is what really makes this feel like a slog every time I start over to see how long it takes me to get every fruit. So although I do really like the introduction for new players, the more I revisit this story mode, the less I like how it kicks off. I should probably just jump into how I feel about the story because it takes center stage, more so than either of the previous 2 games. As was established at the beginning, the planet Kopai is starving as a result of gluttony and apparently no thinking ahead. Since they only eat fruit, they send out little drones to find a planet that has any, which turns out to be the newly dubbed PNF 404. So Alf, Brittany the best girl, and Captain Charlie launch out, crash, and must meet back up. After day 2, the days play out like more typical Pikmin, but the story is really what the actual progression is built around. Every area has a signal coming from a boss arena that points towards your next objective. You can explore the area as much as you want, but until you go there, beat the boss, and collect whatever plot point device is there, you're not moving forward. This does really help streamline progression quite a bit actually. You can spend a day or 2 grabbing all the fruit you can, and you'll find a new Pikmin type to start multiplying in each area, so you can do whatever you want. And when you decide you want to go fight the boss, you can go do that and move on. Assuming you're not having a totally miserable time and generally know what you're doing, you probably won't be in the same area for more than, say, 4, maybe 5 days tops. Let's go with 5, which would be about 65 minutes. I wish it was 4 more than that, but at any rate, you won't be spending more than just over an hour of your time in any given location on a casual playthrough. All of my playthroughs have averaged about 16 days, so there you go. Being able to return to earlier areas later also helps make the game a lot more replayable, as you have more flexibility in how long you want to play the game for. You can turn it on just to see the story, or you can use that streamlined progression and the relaxed day limit to encourage you to return to the previous areas before moving on. I actually dig that. All my playthroughs can be different lengths and still feel fulfilling. But the actual story itself is kind of lame, honestly. First, you have to sit through the long opening, and then you take a while to meet up with all 3 captains. Then you rescue Louie, you have to chase him down again after he steals your juice. You unlock the final area, you have to rescue Olimar from this blob that has a crush on him or something. and you get your spaceship's key back and book it home. It's all just a wild goose chase up until the end. And while I will admit, as a big Olimar fan, it was fun seeing his little notes hidden around the planet. It was good his spirit of curiosity is still so strong, and ultimately saving him at the end was pretty heartwarming to see. Louis really got under my skin with his stupid, selfish attitude throughout the whole thing. Him running off with all our juice was the most interesting part of the whole thing, but that's about it as far as standout moments besides the final area. The story is far more involved, which means a couple things. For one, there are way more interruptions. You can hardly do anything in this game without having to watch a phone call or getting a transmission from the SS Drake. I think the most disappointing thing though is how it's focused completely on the here and now of our heroes' plights. It's not focused on the end goal because that keeps changing, so it's always in the present. Alf, Brittany, and Charlie finally have some good interplay between them like I really wanted in Pikmin 2, and they introduced floating text boxes that don't interrupt the flow of gameplay, which is awesome. But these characters aren't as endearing as Olimar was in the first game. There's hardly any development to any of them besides Brittany. It's interesting because they're essentially in an almost identical situation to Olimar from Pikmin 1, but they don't ever act as worried or sensitive as he did. They talk about how it'll be great when they're the heroes of their planet, but they don't miss anybody from their planet. It's like they're worried, but they're not as realistically portrayed as Olimar was. There's no outside characters to fill in the emotional gaps in this game either. The focus is just on our main trio, and they act more plucky and less concerned with their plight at any given time. Probably because they have more juice than they'll ever need to survive. Good lord, that is so much juice. I mean, I think the story's fine. It has some good moments, and it's a good follow-up to 2, as any attempt to make Olimar do something again would have been really boring as a main narrative focus. It was a really smart move to play into the 9-year wait to see Olimar again, even if the characterization and overall repetitive structure make it less than a masterpiece in my eyes. It gets better as it goes along though, if you ask me. After you rescue Louis the second time and can return to other areas to get the rest of the fruit, the game chills out on the cutscenes and reaches its true potential as the ultimate openish world Pikmin Zen experience. The ending being more ambitious is great too, because it closes this game out on a great bombastic note that still feels true to Pikmin's themes and tones. Being constantly on the run from this giant monster and eventually facing it down is so terrifying and reminds you how ecosystems can get demolished by a single creature in the wrong environment, but also that most animals are no match for opposable thumbs. The day system also plays into some of my overall dissatisfaction with this story mode. It's a good compromise between the first game's hard time limit and the second game's complete lack of one. The first game's main collectible was the ship parts. The second had treasure, and in this game, you're collecting fruits. At the end of the day, these things are squeezed into canisters of juice, and at the end of every day, you drink 1 canister of juice. So essentially, you can create your own day limit by collecting more fruit per day. Unfortunately, even if you aren't trying, it's very easy to collect an excess of fruit, which means playing the long game isn't really needed. Louis stealing all your juice does kind of shake things up until you rescue him and get it all back. However, even if the limit on the number of playable days ends up being meaningless, it's okay in my book. The counter at the top of the screen has a triumphant revitalization, so efficiency is once again brought back to Pikmin, yes! The captain's new AI system and a lack of shitty time-freezing dungeon crawling really make you want to get moving during each day. It's interesting to me because in my first draft of the script, I was about to be like, this new take on the day system is a good concept, but the number of days makes it fall flat. Oh, get real. That's not true at all. I didn't like Pikmin 1 because you could only explore for 30 days, and I didn't not like Pikmin 2 because you could explore for as many days as you wanted. I hated Pikmin 2 because it gave you no reason to try and be efficient with a set of mechanics that work best under the 13-minute timer. And I loved Pikmin 1 so much because that trigger to my head kept me moving. It's the same here. Well, the trigger might be moving further and further away, but it is still there, which makes this take on the day system stand tall along with its oldest brother. And can I just say that with the combination of this and the game's great new mechanics, that this recorded playthrough is me at my absolute Pikmin best? I hate gloating, but like, come on, all the fruits in 16 days? That's pretty good, right? Like, I totally force bent that trigger backwards. I do think it could be improved by some sort of harder limit though. So for Pikmin 4, which will probably, well, hopefully, well, I really want it to be out by the end of the decade, I will re-propose my incremental day limit idea from the previous video. I think that's the only way for you to be truly pushed to play the long game with your strategy while also being lenient enough to take some pressure off for newer players. Although I really love all the areas on display in Pikmin 3, there isn't much to dig into about the level design here. It's the typical deal. Collectibles and enemies are all over the place, meaning you'll have to multitask by getting your dudes to tear down stuff, build stuff, or move whatever. Just way more of what we've already seen, but I do mean way more. The areas are all ginormous, sometimes being made of several smaller paths that all interconnect. So despite the fact that I don't have a lot to dive into with each of the individual stages, I can confidently say that they're really, really great, especially because they're not empty and padded out. They actually compensate for all the new moves at your disposal. It helps that this game still has an excellent control scheme, even if we aren't using a Wii remote this time. Although the Switch's Joy-Cons can be used to kind of emulate playing with a Wii remote and nunchuck, most people will choose to play with a Pro controller. That's my controller of choice, and I played 90% of my first playthrough with it, except for when I ran out of AA's, so I had to switch to the Joy-Cons because I was broke. I hate college. But I do love this new control scheme. They added gyro aim, so you'll still be able to have the precision of motion aiming, but with a more comfortable overall setup. The buttons are all closer together, making actions easier to perform overall. My main complaints from previously were the accidental jimmying of the pointer by mashing the throw button, as well as the easy to shift camera controls, which weren't all that necessary to begin with. These have been absolutely obliterated here. Missing throws won't be an issue anymore due to lock-on targeting. Once you click the ZR button, your pointer will stay stuck to an object or enemy, and you can run around and toss your Pikmin at it and still hit dead on. And the camera issues were fixed by taking them away from the D-pad and putting them on the right stick. I wish you could zoom out instead of just moving it horizontally, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And with the terrible drift I have, at least I don't have to worry about anything if it's just horizontal. The only issue this time is that tilting an entire controller to move the pointer isn't as precise as the Wii's pointer, and it gets off course easily, to the point where they have a dedicated reset button. Sometimes that even takes a few presses to keep it from drifting, so using the Switch's controls has its own pitfalls just like the Wii remote. But I wouldn't say that either are awful or that one is better than the other. It feels like both controllers were made for Pikmin, and none of the issues I've stated have ever been game breakers, just tiny kinks that I really like shaming. The captains are muscular and tactical powerhouses in this game, as this time they can toss each other up ledges and across gaps, which is used for lots of puzzle solving. It gets even better than that though, because when they're on their own, they can move independently, and you can even tell them to walk somewhere on their own using the Go Here command. That means you can have all three at entirely different spots on the map, all working on something, which is a brilliant change and a huge improvement on how pointless having two captains was in Pikmin 2. There are plenty of moments when you want to stay together in a group so you have somebody to toss. It all depends on the situation. The game makes you pay attention to what's needed for any exact moment, and you planning ahead is what makes this game so captivating. The only thing to really complain about is the interface for switching characters. When you hold Y, a little menu will show up giving you options that you select by moving the control stick in one of the four main directions. The up arrow is for using the returning ultra spicy spray on your Pikmin, the down arrow dismisses the group except for whichever color is currently selected, and the two side arrows switch to either of the available captains. This is fine as a setup, but because of the different combos of captains, who they'll switch to always changes. This has the potential to completely halt your progress, as you might accidentally switch to the wrong captain a couple of times while just trying to do something simple, and it is as exhausting as it sounds. But that's the only genuine complaint I have with the captain system in Pikmin 3, although honestly, it's hard to imagine more than 3 captains per game ever being introduced. RIP concept character D, you'll always have a place in our hearts. I was initially apprehensive about the swarm move getting knocked out the door this time around. It's been replaced with charging, and although it takes some getting used to, I like it a lot. You simply tap a button, and whichever Pikmin type you have selected will dash forth. It's fast, and the Pikmin even handle it well, as only the required amount for carrying something will actually grab onto it, so you'll still have more of that type to use for something else. It does make combat slightly less hands-on than before, as you can't lead the entire group. You can only send them into the fray and whistle them back. But I don't really care about Pikmin combat that much, so that's no downside to me. This time, all the Pikmin types feel far more balanced as far as the story mode is concerned. The purple Pikmin absolutely broke combat and nulled one of the red's uses, and the white Pikmin were better but were far more situational. But this time all the Pikmin types have been balanced and updated to pretty much perfection. The reds still have their fire resistance going for them, and they're stronger at normal fighting. The blues still take care of water covered areas, and they're better fighters this time around because they can swim up and get their foes, which is sick. The yellow Pikmin can go higher than usual and can once again deal with electrical walls. They can also use their bodies as a chain to conduct electricity in the game's underground areas. The 2 new types are far better at different things this time. The rock Pikmin seem like such a silly idea, but they're so fun to use in practice. They can be used to break crystals that are now all over the place. They're also perfect in combat as they can hit like a truck and can't get crushed. This may seem like it makes the other Pikmin, especially the reds, useless in combat, but the rock Pikmin don't have elemental weaknesses, and they can't stick to things and keep attacking. They bounce off and get weaker afterwards, so the reds still have their place on the battlefield. The winged Pikmin are the cutest in the series, and they obviously have wings. This means they can carry things over walls and pass over water, and they can reach things higher in the air and lift these special gates. This is balanced by them also being the weakest Pikmin type, so they aren't much good in combat. They're far better for handling most of the lifting. All of these uses are evenly made use of, making planning ahead even more useful. Of course, it also helps that a lot of the new tasks make the Pikmin as a whole more useful. Having them run back and forth with the bridge tiles and digging in the soft soil are great ways to assure you can do some good multitasking regardless of which Pikmin types you have with you. Not to mention every type can carry bomb racks now, which is just so helpful. The AI of these little guys is far better this time around too. They never stop and do their own thing unprompted anymore, and they added a feature where if you whistle a group of working Pikmin, they'll stop and only come back if you whistle at them a second time, which prevents you from accidentally stopping any work. Pretty much the only thing they're still iffy on is returning to you from around walls and stuff, as they can get stuck on parts of the environment still. They should really focus on making an intelligent pathfinding tool for the next game. This time, the story mode has 3 difficulty settings: normal, hard, and ultra spicy. Okay, that's so fun. Normal should be called easy, as the days are 18 minutes long in this one. Hard has the regular 13-minute day, and the enemies get twice as strong. Ultra spicy mode cracks down on the player by limiting you to 60 Pikmin as opposed to 100, and making fruit give half the juice. In a word, this difficulty option sucks. It barely changes anything. Pikmin combat isn't hard as long as you're careful, and having less Pikmin barely affects how efficient you can be in snagging as much fruit as possible. The only meaningful addition is the reduction of fruit juice, but you can still beef up your juice stock. On my first ultra spicy playthrough, I collected every single fruit, and I still ended with like 30 days left to clear the formidable oak. The only way this selection means anything is if you suck butt. Unfortunately, this is only the beginning of the quote-unquote deluxe port being crappy in the adding new content department, but we'll get to that one in a bit. Despite the story mode being a little less enthralling and replayable than I'd hoped due to a too repetitive structure, the moment-to-moment gameplay was the most perfect the series has had yet. So it's great that Pikmin 3 Deluxe has 3 fully fleshed out extra modes to continue making full use of this excellent gameplay. These are where I ended up spending most of my time with the game, and I also find them to be the most replayable parts of the game for the most part. The main attraction here is Mission Mode, a set of timed challenges, each featuring original stages made just for the mode, well, except for the enemy battling ones, which reuse the main 5 areas for its remix stages. But we'll let that one slide. This mode is focused on single-player stages that will really shove your planning and multitasking beyond their limits. Each stage has a limited assortment of Pikmin and a strict time limit. You'll need to accomplish one of 3 objectives during this time limit: collecting all the treasure in a level, killing all the enemies, and doing a rematch against the story mode bosses with whatever Pikmin they give you. Collecting treasure is my favorite type of challenge by a long shot. These stages will have you splitting your captains up as much as possible and staring at the map for extended periods of time, but don't get boozled. The footage may look boring when I'm planning, but my brain is going a gazillion light years per millisecond trying to create a foolproof plan to drag everything back to base. Playing all the stages over and over and over and over in hopes of getting that elusive platinum medal is such a great challenge and represents the absolute peak of Pikmin's unique gameplay as far as I'm concerned. Beating the enemies was still fun in its own way, but I honestly didn't find it nearly as challenging. The goal isn't to get everything back to base, it's just to take out every creature in the stage. So while you can take time to harvest some corpses, you can also just blaze through and take everybody out. It didn't take me more than a couple tries to platinum rank any of these. Refighting the bosses was an absolute letdown. It doesn't rank you on how many Pikmin you lose, it only ranks you on time as far as I could tell. So since I was just tossing my Pikmin with the most reckless of abandons, I beat all of these in one try. I was in and out of this mode in half an hour, what a letdown. With the main 2 challenge categories though, I will say the best thing is the level design. The first 10 stages reuse themes from the story mode but have unique layouts that are interesting and believable as part of the Pikmin world. I love them all so much, and the subsequent remix stages are interesting as they have totally different treasure placements and even start you off in different spots. I found them genuinely challenging and fun to learn. The last 5 stages, which were DLC Pack 2 in the Wii U release, are where it really goes off the chain though, since they added themes outside of the normal natural feels. The Rest Yard and the Secret Cove are my favorites. Guys, check this one out, okay? The Secret Cove has the same layout as the Forest Navel from Pikmin 1. I am losing it! The best layout and theme is the Fortress of Festivity though. It's a huge Christmas themed stage that features a tree with a lacy slide and presents and toy themed borders, but there's also just huge and somehow not rotten food you get to walk around on. I like that the mini boss on the pizza burrows inside of it. That's so cute and also physically implausible, but mostly cute. The only one I really don't like is the Clockwork Chasm. It floats over a bottomless pit, which means the Pikmin are easier to kill than ever, but I don't know, it also just feels too video gamey to me. For the most part, all these level designs and themes are excellent though, and it's definitely a new Christmas tradition of mine to play through the Fortress of Festivity. While Mission Mode is the pinnacle of Pikmin single-player content, there's also a strictly multiplayer mode as well. Bingo Battle sees 2 players using their squads to fill out their individual bingo boards with things from the stage. It's easy to dick over your opponent by overpowering their squads and stealing stuff from them, or even getting your Pikmin to chase the other captain and keep them from playing. Me and my friend Dave actually played this quite a bit when the game first came out, and he summed it up quite nicely.
War as hell.
That it is. He isn't as much of a swag Pikmin master as yours truly, but obviously he's great to play with. If you ask me, this is by far one of the best multiplayer modes Nintendo has ever designed, so almost regardless of skill level, anybody can pick this up and have a fun little competition. It gets an A+ for addictive. Oh yeah, side stories exist, lol. As new content for the Switch port, a mode featuring Olimar and Louie's escapades after the story was added. It's split into a prologue part before Olimar's capture in the story mode, which reuses the Wii U version's secret video files as the cutscenes. And then there are several missions unlocked after you beat the story mode that serve as an epilogue where Olimar and Louie return to do some more work. And that's all these are, more missions. This feels like a bit of a disappointment. I do wish a new shorter story objective was created using a strict day limit, but there's no way implementing more smaller missions wasn't easier and more feasible to add in, so I won't get too upset. I do like the shorter little story bits because it is a respectful little sequel to Pikmin 2 in terms of continuing Olimar's story. Its unique objectives like carrying ship parts or reuniting with Louie after an argument endear us to these characters once more, and it even has some good fan service for fans of the first game. Arrangements of the final trial and title theme can be heard in some of these missions, which I really appreciate. And the ending with the Japanese vocals may feel out of place until you remember that both of the previous games were promoted using vocal songs, so it's cool that they added this into a re-release of 3. All these missions are super easy though. That's ultimately why this mode is as forgettable as it is. I beat almost all of these on my first try, even the penultimate one at the Formidable Oak, which was a stressful seeming boss rush until I beat the enemies senseless, while being senseless. The only one that gave me any trouble was the one where I had to clear a path to get a ship part to the goal. That one took a few tries to get through, and so I thought it was the best of the new levels. None of them were outright bad, but I just wish that they were all harder. Like, if they weren't gonna make an ambitious new story mode, at least give me a new challenge to keep me occupied for a good chunk of time. The side stories were a decent concept for an add-on, but like with the ultra spicy difficulty, it didn't actually add on that much to the game. Is it time? Can I gush about how pretty this game is? Look at it! It isn't as visually diverse as Pikmin 2, but who cares? Every texture, every creature, every object looks as realistic as possible, and it is beautiful. Sure, if you want to get nerdy with me, it only runs at 720p with 30 frames per second, and yeah, I wish it ran smoother too. Having this game at an even higher resolution and even smoother frame rate would probably help the world of Pikmin feel even more like the real world, which is what the series is all about. I have a feeling that the number of Pikmin on screen is what's keeping this game locked at those numbers. And while you are rushing around trying to be as efficient as possible, Pikmin isn't a game with fast-moving gameplay, so I'm okay with the frame rate. At least it's stable. I wish the resolution could have been bumped up for some better detailed textures on the environments though. When you're moving around, they look great, but some ground textures just look like JPEGs. All in all, I have to say Pikmin 3 is by far the glitchiest game in the series. The other games had moments with the Pikmin's AI being wacky or not functioning properly, but here it's low-key on another level. There's just a lot more extreme visual and technical problems here. Pikmin constantly jittering when they're in a crowd, the exiting a burrow animation looks so bad whenever they all clip through each other. For some reason, the Pikmin refusing to latch onto things and carry them is an issue in all 3 games, so that's just kind of a tradition at this point, but it's definitely the worst here for sure. This flickering light that irritates my eyes and probably also your eyes is in the Formidable Oak, which I can't really tell if that's how it's supposed to look or not, but I'm pretty sure it's a glitch. And the incredible and omnipotent floating nectar. This one was at least funny. I poked at it and tried to get it to do anything for most of that day, but it just wouldn't move. It ended up getting memorialized in a photo I took that showed up in the preview photos every time I went to land at Twilight River again. I love this so much. Yeah, I don't know why there's so many issues like this in a first-party Nintendo game though. But please do not get me wrong, Pikmin 3 is a very polished game. The Pikmin, the creatures in these ecosystems, and the fruit especially all look gorgeous even after 7 or 8 years. I mean, come on, look at these fruits and tell me they don't look tasty. I still like how the other games look, don't get me wrong, but the raw graphical prowess on display here makes this the best looking Pikmin game by a long shot. Pikmin 4 has a lot of competition. I hope I get to lay my eyes on it before I die. Pikmin 3's soundtrack finally gets to use live instruments, and it sounds incredible. The wacky and tranquil ambience from before gets to be even more serene thanks to the combined efforts of Hajime Wakai and series newcomers Asuka Hayazaki and Atsuko Asahi. Hayazaki had worked on New Super Mario Bros. And Mario Kart Wii, as well as Twilight Princess and Spirit Tracks. Asahi was a newcomer at the time, having only worked on Animal Crossing, New Leaf, and Steel Diver. I've never heard that music before. Dang, this is pretty good. This is all around a solid team, and they did a bang-up job with Pikmin 3. I love the music in every area of this game. It's really great. I also really enjoy the cave and rainy day music. It's all weird but inviting. If this soundtrack interests you, you should watch Scruffy's video on how the boss theme cycles through its variations. It's hard to show off in this video, but the variations all really add to the fights. As you can probably guess though, Mission Mode has my favorite songs. They're small and fun, fitting with the arcadey nature of the work you're doing. They even added some new tracks for the side story mode in the Switch version, which are swayers. As a transition into my conclusion, you know what else I really like? I love the credits music. Pikmin 3 Deluxe truly brings out the best of Pikmin in multiple areas. Its moment-to-moment gameplay is as polished and addictive as possible due to the additions of targeting, charging, and captain commanding. The graphics and music have the best production values in the series, and each of the extra modes add a substantial or at least intriguing content to the game. Some of the mission modes are better than others, but the actual challenge stages represent the best of the series overall. The story mode may be a disappointment in a number of ways, and the new content presented in the Switch port isn't anything to write home about, but between how great its highs are and the fact that it's on Nintendo's most accessible platform to date, plus, I forgot to mention this, but you can play through the story mode with a friend, which is great in its own way. I think this is the best shot at glory the Pikmin series has. It isn't as perfectly structured as Pikmin 1, maybe you don't like that it isn't as expansive as Pikmin 2, but despite its flaws, this is hands down the most recommendable Pikmin game. And if you've been watching my videos to gauge if you be into this strange plant slavery series, pick this game up as soon as you can. You can get the demo on the eShop and try it right now, and I guarantee with some time, you'll really come to understand why so many people love this game. Wait, no, this series. Since this is the end of the entire retrospective, I need to talk about where I think the series should go from here. With more powerful hardware inevitably on the horizon, I think this game could really show off a potential 4K console. Pikmin 3 is already eye-melting, so I want to see an even more immersive look for Pikmin 4. I think adding a colony of characters could add quite a bit of depth to the gameplay as well. You could recruit characters from the colony as temporary captains with new skills, and you could send extra Pikmin to the colony to help grow it even while you're away. Whenever Pikmin 4 comes out, as Miyamoto has said it's actually close to completion, like 5 years ago I think at this point, I will pick it up and play it. Obviously. It's one of my most hyped games of all time from one of my favorite Nintendo series, but I have to accept that it'll probably be a while. That's just something I've had to deal with over the years. With Pikmin 3 Deluxe turning out to be the best-selling entry across the whole trilogy, hopefully it's sooner than later, but I obviously don't have any control over that. In the meantime, I have 3 really great games that I will always make time for. I'll always return to Pikmin for Olimar's struggle to survive and to get faster every time. I'll revisit Pikmin 2 for its beautiful and immersive environments and world building. And I'll revisit Pikmin 3 for its incredible presentation, great quality of life changes, and cocaine-esque mission modes. This series and its natural aesthetic and addictive gameplay will keep me replaying it for years to come, and it's that love I have for it that made these videos a ton of fun to work on as well. I'm glad I get to give one of my favorite trilogies its due diligence. Thank you to everyone who joined me on this look back. Join me for whatever's next, but I can promise it will not be Pikmin related. I hope I'll see you seeing me.